Hello guys, this is Marco. I'm a matte painter and concept artist working in the industry for the past 17 years. I started doing 3D for many years for film and TV, and then moved to look development in pre-production, 3D look development, and then following my passion for photography, I started working as a matte painter, and I worked in the industry as a matte painter for 7 years now. And while I was doing this, I started to develop more and more the need and the will to work a little bit more in the creative process. And so for VFX or production before the actual shot is created, so before doing the matte painting, but working more in creation of the environment in the design phase, in the concept phase. And definitely compared to other people, I'm still in the process, like for everyone else, but definitely online you can find a lot of very interesting tutorials taught by the masters of this amazing art. And definitely you can find better painters than me, but this is, for me, it's interesting because I've been requested to do this breakdown for this piece. And for me it's interesting because it's always a work in progress. So even by telling you the story, let's say, of this piece, I can see it now with a different eye. And I can see what I did right, what I did wrong, what I could improve. Generally, I don't like what I do. I mean, I like what I do for the first 5 minutes after I finish a piece, and then I start to see a lot of problems. But I think this is the case for a lot of us. So in any case, I hope this will be useful. Definitely concept art wise, you can find amazing tutorials online. So I'm definitely not at that level. I'm working towards that, definitely. And but hopefully, even from this tutorial, you can find something interesting, considering that I come from, a different path than maybe most of the, concept artists, that I have developed a certain eye for photorealism, that I've developed a certain habit of using 3D, which is not, used in this case, but no matter what, 3D or photography. And so maybe there's something interesting here, and I hope there is. And so let's get started. Okay, so first of all, the piece is called Rebirth. It's important, in my opinion, even when I work on personal projects, to give a backstory, to give yourself a backstory, because no matter what, at the end of the day, what we do for our clients is to solve problems or to illustrate key moments of a story. So when you train for that, like I'm doing, I like the idea of giving myself a certain kind of context. In this case, it's Rebirth. It's a town. Like unfortunately many nowadays in Middle East and in other parts of the world, that after dictatorship is coming back to life. And there is this image of the kid peeing on the statue, the broken statue, which is the symbol of time that has, thank God, changed. And there is this market, and slowly the city is coming back to life. And this was the main story behind this piece. Even it doesn't have to be anything complex, but I think no matter what is important, because it trains you to what you will have to do eventually. And it's a good habit. It gives you definitely more ideas, and it's what we have to do. I think it's important. So again, let's get started. Okay, so I shot the plate for this piece on set. I was on set for a TV commercial, and it was in Bulgaria, and there were backlots, and I found this backlot, not where we were shooting, but another one, and there was this neighborhood of a Middle Eastern city. So definitely, as I'm used to doing, I need, not only I like, but I need to take pictures of interesting, architecture and whatever I am, if it's for work or if it's for leisure, and I'm on holiday. It's really important to take pictures and to create your own library, and definitely we'll talk about this more later. But so I took these pictures, and then I stitched some images together, and this is the basis for this piece, and let's see how I used it. Okay, so let's start. As you can see, the first thing that I do, like every time, is to create an overlay grid for perspective. In this case, it's easier. I mean, we're talking about buildings and architecture, so finding the vanishing points is it's not a big deal, but it's always important, because whatever you add, obviously it has to make sense, let's say, perspective-wise. So this is the first thing that I do. Then, as you can see here on the left, I have, and I collected before, a lot of reference They can come from, photos that I took, or Google, or, photos that I ask my friends to take when they go on holiday. I'm such a pain in the ass with them, because it's always important for us to have to create this kind of a big library of images that could be used as a reference, or really as ingredients for the paintings. Nowadays we have to do, the clients want more photorealism, so relying on photos is super important. But of course you cannot put photos like they are, and you have to pay attention that everything matches and the end result is something balanced, let's say. Okay, so outside of this, you guys all know what I'm talking about. It's good that the stage panorama that you see here, which is the base of my painting, was shot on an overcast day, so that no harsh shadows were present, and I'm able to create my own lighting, based on the idea that I have. This is very important. Here, I'm taking other pieces of photos, from the same location, I think this is, and I'm creating something that, in my opinion, looks a little bit more interesting, and this, as this opening for this square where the market is happening, and so as you can see, slowly the things, take shape, and changing a little bit of the size of some buildings, because I want to I like that building and I want to make it bigger. You will see that I will extend also the floors for this one. As you can see, I'm completely replacing it because the facade of this building is more interesting for me. And well, I mean, I try to find a trade-off between speed and realism. Of course, for me, the challenge is that I have a mad painter mentality, so I always tend, because this is what I'm asked to, I always tend to go towards the photorealism, to try to pay attention to details. But when you do concept art, you need to be pretty fast and give ideas, and clients cannot wait for 1 week to see something. So I'm fighting against this mentality that obviously I have because of my main job, let's say, and trying to find a good balance, between speed and look, and trying to find also ways with the brushwork to better integrate, photographic material with the parts that are just, are painted. So it's a big work in progress, and but it's also I think very interesting. However, it's important for me to say that I didn't have the chance to go to attend a fine art school. I come from design, and then I'm a dropout from university. I start to study on my own as much as possible 3D, and then photography, and so I don't have the basis of fine art, very, very little, let's say. So the past 4 years, I decided that this is something that I needed. I think it's very important to have the proper fundamentals, even if you think about brushwork, perspective and the use of color. Plus, with so much technology, I felt the need after so many years of, getting my hands dirty with the material, with charcoal, with paint. So this is something that I've been doing constantly, and I try to do it every day, as a training. I know that the results are obviously after 3 years, they suck. They still suck, and they will suck for a long time, I think. But I think it's important. It's important for a lot of reasons. So having the right fundamentals is really paramount. Above all, when you try to blend, painting with photography, with 3D. You have to have bases that allow you to do this, to see things in a certain way, to use the brushes in a certain way. It's a huge process, but I think it's very important. So going back to the piece right now, from different photographs, I'm taking elements that I like. As you could see before, what I did on the plate is to create a very quick and rough sketch, drawing, but also writing down the ideas of the elements that I want to add. I don't know, the kind of lighting certain areas, if I want to enhance certain areas more than others. So it's like a rough concept on the plate, which I go back regularly to check to see if I am doing the right thing that I was planning at the beginning. Then of course, while you're working, because also it's a personal project, so you have a kind of freedom. You maybe realize by testing something that something looks better than what you thought before, and then you adapt. This is absolutely normal. It's part of the process, so nothing crazy there. So here, like I was saying, I'm starting to add details. Then of course I have to bring everything together, and to do this properly, brushwork becomes very important, So I have a selection of brushes, very, painterly more or less, that I, collected, during the years, and that I found online. And but brushwork is really important. I think it's something that I really have to work a lot on, and that's why also working with the real brushes definitely helps you. But it's important because at the end of the day you see how many elements we are playing with, and it's brushwork that the technique that eventually allows you to bring everything together in a pleasing way, and find this trade-off between photorealism and painterly style. So here, as you can see, I'm taking different elements, and I start adding people from different textures, from different photos, and let's say that I start to create the block out. So as you can see, I'm putting all different elements. See how they look. There is like I was saying, an idea, the base, but at the same time I also try to, not to play by the book, which is the book that I created at the beginning for myself, but I try to see if certain things look better than others, and when I'm okay with something that I'm adding, I start to blend things together, which you will see more in a few minutes, and you will see that the first thing that I'm going to do is to blend and to match values, because more of more importantly than colors and the textures and then the brushwork, the first thing is that the value need to make sense. So if something is closer to us or something is in the back, it has to be treated, I'm sorry, in a very different way, and you all know that maybe the colors can be wrong, let's say, but if the values are there, you already, more than halfway there. It's so important. But anyway, right now I'm still trying to play with all these elements, and with the basic idea in mind, with the basic layout that I have in my little rough sketch. But I'm trying to enrich the piece. I'm trying to enrich the story this way. So I'm adding this people gathering in this market, this time of the day, and at the same time, as you can see, I'm adding textures for for the part that are destroyed of the city, that have to be hints of a war, of a destruction, no matter what, a time in which things were not so happy. So usual procedure, texturing, layer blending, see what looks good, using brushes to blend the textures in, and continuing like this for quite some time until you're happy. It's very important to understand that the scene, it has to read, so there has to be a main focus, and that's why composition becomes very important, and the way you put all the elements, which is actually composition, is the layout. The story has to be, let's say, clear, and I tend in other paintings that I did, sometimes I tend to put too many things, and this can be distracting. Actually, concept, even if it's for an environment, it works better when it's simple, when you can clearly read what's happening, when there's a main focus and maybe other center of interest. But I think that, as you can say, as you know, less is more. So this is something that I have to remind myself every time, because we have this tendency of adding maybe too many things. And even the way you treat the elements that you add is important, because even the brushwork can be slightly different. So there will be areas that are not so detailed, and areas instead where you want people to look, where actually there is more contrast, there is more sharpness, there is more detail overall. You have to guide your viewer inside the story, inside the image, and this is something that you develop with time. So as you can see here, I'm cleaning elements that I added. I'm painting some new elements. I'm bringing in some clouds, and then I'm trying to stylize them, because I don't want them to be I don't want people to focus on them too much. They're just details. They help me create the mood for this, but they have to stay there. It's there, clouds are there, that's good. They look nice, but I know they're there, but I don't have to look at them too much, for too long. And as you can see here, I'm enhancing the lighting. So, considering where we started from right now, you have hopefully a better idea of the fact that it's the sun is high. Maybe it's usual magic hour, but no matter what, there are parts of the building, the facade, which are which take light strongly. And then in the back, of course, it's a Middle Eastern city, so I'm adding a typical architecture. Of course, it has to make sense. And I changed the textures, and I improved the lighting. That, of course, needs to match what is in the foreground. Now that I see it with a different eye, I can see that, for example, the tower in the back from a mosque has a light that is mostly a rim light, when actually I should have probably directed the lighting in a slightly different way. It should have been more in light from the front, because I think there is a little bit of a discrepancy between the foreground and the background. But no matter what, it's details. It's always I have a matte painter, but not only. I think this makes sense, and so this is something that I should have done. Anyway, next time it will be better. This is the case. This is the story. It's always about failing. It's always about trying to do something, and then with a clear eye afterwards, thinking about what you did right and what you did wrong. I think this is the way to improve, and hopefully I'm doing it. Maybe slowly, but I'm doing it, I think. And you have to always, even when you go online, you see amazing pieces, and more and more. And so sometimes it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, above all, because I'm not 20 anymore, so there's no, I don't need to feel that I'm better than other people. It really becomes probably when you grow up with maturity, a fight. But it's a fight with yourself. So what is important is that you can look at these amazing things you see online more and more, be inspired by them, realize that these people have a different path than you have. They got to certain results in a different way, but definitely there is one thing in common: they work their ass off. And so if you want to improve, you will not have their styles. It's important, in my opinion, to keep your individuality. Even in art is important, and so that the style will be different. But no matter what, I think that you have to be inspired. You have to be. You have to keep on pushing, pushing, so that tomorrow you will be better than today. And that's it, and not compare too much with other guys. They're masters, and sometimes I see these things and I say, geez, I suck, I'll never be like this. But actually, the important things that I create, that I try to improve every day, and at the end of the day, that my clients like and need what they see. Because at the end of the day, we do this, and definitely it's we're very lucky. It's amazing. It's a beautiful job, but we need to pay the bills. So we have to improve, so that what we show and what we can offer is appealing to clients, and they will be able to call us and say, okay, I like your style. We need this, and hopefully you will be able to achieve the goal and to do what they need. In any case, you can see that hopefully, it's hopefully it's not so tedious, but you see then here I'm adding a little bit of vegetation. So I want to create elements that are not only architectural, but this is also a sign of life. Okay, so you see green, you see trees in the back, and so the town seems richer. It's you feel that the situation is getting better. Here I'm adding this fountain, which will be the place where the kid will pee on the statue, and that will be the, let's say, the focus of the image. And you will see that I will add this old lady pointing at the kid and shouting at the kid, who's no matter what doing something he shouldn't do, and this will lead the eye into actually what is happening. Here I'm substituting. I don't want to have this bush or whatever it is, this little thing. I want to add this fountain, where the statue will be. And so adding the fountain, thinking about the shadows, blurring the shadows a little bit, matching the shadows from the other areas. Here I'm bringing in the statue, and I change, of course, the texture. I'm painting to give, to stylize, okay, with brushwork, and to add different kind of details. Then, of course, thinking about the perspective, thinking about, in this case, the highlights, and then obviously make things also not recognizable, because depends on where you take them. But this is very important, so we have to use texture in a way so that they, we don't steal. This is very important. That's why, having a library of images and stuff that you take is super important. But then in this case, of course, it's obvious that the kid is being on the statue. I cannot make the statue recognizable, of a leader or someone, obviously. So in this case, as you can see, even the shadow here in the foreground helps me to drive the attention to the area that is important to me. And so this kind of, let's say, they're not tricks, but let's call them tricks, is are very important. So it's brushwork, is of course the composition, the layout, but the shadows are part of the composition. So I give the idea that behind us there is a row of buildings, and they're casting the shadow on the ground, and so the area in light is smaller, and this is where ideally you look first. Okay, so here the baby is peeing. Of course, I took an image. He had pants on, so I took the pants off, and I, of course, again, I used brushwork to stylize a little bit. It's interesting, in my opinion, that I found this image of the baby looking at us, and it's like it's challenging, even the woman who's yelling at him. And then here you go, paint pea painting, which is very important nowadays in our industry. Pea painting is absolutely important. But so I'm trying to to bring, this is the focus of the image, so I'm trying to pay attention to the details, to what's happening, and to trying to make it look interesting and believable at the same time. Then I go back, as you could see, I hit all the other layers that I created, and now I'm going back one by one, and often you will see, it probably is too fast, you don't see it, but I use an adjustment layer, black and white, so that I can concentrate on the values. Here I'm taking these elements again with brushwork. I'm stylizing a little bit. I'm creating the shadows on the ground so that everything matches. And yeah, it's like this. It's going back and forth between the idea that you have, and then going to have a look at, having a look at all the elements you wanted to add. Taking care of the, matching the values first of all, and then stylizing textures, adding highlights, and so thinking about, behind the statue, I wanted to create this area which is darker, because I wanted the statue to stand out, so where to look. So there I'm adding details. Of course, it will create the idea of this, the area being rich, but at the same time I don't want to steal attention. Here I'm adding the little characters on the stairs, and this the market. So I'm substituting the windows, because those were supposed to be houses, but I want them to become shops, let's say. So I'm adding this the products and typical things that you find in a market. Okay, so here I'm going a little bit faster. I don't want this to be too tedious, and as you can see, I'm continuing adding details and characters. And the main thing when I add this thing, again, the procedure is checking the values, checking the color, using the brush strokes to stylize and to create this painterly look. And then I use even the brushes to try to glaze warms and cools in in the shadows, on the highlights, and trying to retain some details or get rid of the details that are too much, too high frequency, details that we don't need. As you can see here on the lady, I'm trying to reduce the amount of information. Then of course she's at the edges, so people will not look too much at her. She needs to be there, let's say, as a detail, but again, doesn't have to steal attention here, as you can see in the shop. I'm trying to stylize and glazing with brush strokes, and try to bring everything together, and checking all the time values. As you can see, I'm flipping the image often so that I have a fresh eye. I can see, I can spot details and errors above all, more easily. And here I'm adding other elements. Someone is living there, so you see the clothes hanging from the windows. And here I'm adding people that come into the square. They're coming to the market, and I'm checking. Here again, stylizing, going back to see my reference, to see elements that could be interesting. And here I'm changing the clothes. I'm always trying to personalize. It's very important. It has to be your creation. You shouldn't just copy and paste an image like you find. As you can see, this guy with the typical dress, clothes from the Middle East. This long thing is coming to the market, and behind him there's a crowd of people. But again, I take some details out. Here I'm adding these products that you can typically find in this market. It's always good if you have an experience and in this kind of places, which by the way are amazing. They're so different what we're used to, but you can see, you can really smell different perfumes, and it's something that it's always experienced. What I'm saying is that it can be a concept artist, a mad painter, but at the end of the day, if you live 24/7 in your little room, you don't go out and live, definitely your work will suffer from this, because even if this place is okay, when we do sci-fi, it's a little bit more difficult. This kind of places, what I'm saying is traveling is super important, because even when you paint something like this, you can start thinking about your memories of these places and the smells and the colors, and definitely this helps when you try to illustrate something like this. So it's always important, not only painting and drawing and the computer all day long. It's very important, but at the same time, go out and live. I think that this is has been very important for me, and I'm sure, and I hope you're doing the same, because definitely your work will benefit from this. So we're getting closer to the end. I'm adding details and enrich the whole painting, and adding life, let's say, and interest that again, it's very important, is there, but it doesn't steal attention. The first glimpse we have of the image, it should be clear, and I hope it is, or maybe it's not. It will be better in my next painting, but it has to be the story, has to be the focus. Then you can start wandering, your eyes can start wandering around the image, and you can see the details and appreciate the details, hopefully. But it has to be ideally simple, and the idea, because the simpler it is, the better the idea is sold, let's say. So again, other details, changing the colors, being sure that perspective is correct, adding also a little bit of chaos that you often find in these places. Here I'm working with I'm creating this old woman who's yelling at the boy. At the beginning, you saw in my sketch, I wanted to put something in the extreme foreground and maybe put it out of focus, but then I discarded the idea. I prefer to use this character, this old woman, yelling at the boy who's doing something shouldn't do. I thought it was funnier, let's say. Here I'm adding other people looking at the products, whatever they are. It's it's a market, it's a mess, but it's full of interesting things, interesting colors. So I don't know, it has to be, let's say, a place that you would like to visit if you want. Then of course it depends on the story, and if you work for clients, you have certain directions that you have to follow. Well, this is obvious, but when you work on your personal things, you can explore. You can use these tools, let's say, to be creative, to think about new ideas, to think about how it would be, to be there. I think it's this kind of thoughts are always important to make a better piece. And here I'm putting another character. This guy is looking at what's happening in the scene, maybe smiling. We don't see him, but maybe smiling. As you can see, I'm changing the lighting and trying to be sure that everything matches, Then eventually I got rid of that guy. I didn't like it so much. Again, it's a matter of testing what works, what doesn't, going back, as you can see very briefly, to my initial sketch, to the initial idea, putting something here in the extreme foreground that in a way is framing the action, is framing the area where I want people to see and where is the area that is the focus of my story. Here I'm adding details of a mosque in the background. Let's say that there is an area in the background with all this with the mosque, with a lot of interesting architecture, and this is the square just where the market is happening, but the town is huge, and so you put something to in depth, to sell the idea of scale, to sell the idea that the town is it's vast and will be interesting to visit it. You know what I mean? So trying to add this kind of ideas and thoughts in everything you do. Here I'm trying to introduce atmosphere. It's atmosphere perspective. Atmosphere is absolutely important, and again, it can be a tool to drive the eye. So I don't want people to concentrate too much in the background, and so I use this, which is definitely a photoreal tool, but at the same time, it's let's say even a storytelling tool. So the center is the focus. The guy is peeing on the head, the broken head of the statue of the dictator. Here I'm adding at the end of the process, I like to add some overlays, some texture overlays that then with the brush I tend to apply, not everywhere, but I tend to apply in some, in different areas more or less, depending on where I want, again, the attention, where I need more detail, where I want instead to keep everything more clean. Here I'm adding a little bit of sign of life, which is smoke coming from this. I don't know, maybe these products are also, someone is cooking there you can find food, these kind of things, and checking values all the time, going back and forth, and again adding details, last minute details of distraction. Now I am working on this rooftop, and again at the top I want to give the idea that something happened, that it was an attack, that the city was liberated, and now everything is going back to normal, but you still see the results of what was let's say the oppression and the final destruction of this dictatorship, the change in power, let's say. And here I'm destroying part of the mosque, that dome, and I'm adding something that supposed to be the structure underneath. I don't exactly know how they are, but again, you add details, it has to be, let's say, justified. You need to sell the idea that the fact that these things, whatever you add is believable. It makes sense on what happened, it makes sense in the scene, it makes sense lighting wise. So here I'm adding again details of dirt and destruction and dust and signs of the fact that something happened there, bullet holes and this kind of details that again help me to tell the story. Okay, so getting closer to the final piece, adding the last minute details, extending buildings at the top, adding signs of combat, maybe the combat to liberate the city. And no matter what, the details you had always have to make sense, story-wise and lighting-wise, brushwork-wise, which means, if it's important, I would give him richness and texture and sharpness. If it's not, it can be more painterly, can be, let's say a lost edge, and I'm sure you understand what I mean. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's also important, in my opinion, to do this job as a matte painter, but and as a concept artist, to go out and live, to visit places, to take photographs, but really to live, because I think that your artwork will always benefit from your real life experience, which is not only to create a collection of mental images, the library that you have, but also to think about, when you have to do something, maybe you have seen a similar place and you remember how you lived, the experience that you had, the mood that you felt, which is also not only visual, but it's also smell and things like this. So at the end of the day, you can stay 24/7 in front of your computer and become a master, but maybe your image and your stories will lack some believability in a way, or outside of believability, maybe they will lack your point of view, your voice, let's say, okay, without getting too philosophical here, but you understand what I mean. I think it's important, and plus it's good to take breaks no matter what outside traveling, to work on something, and then take a pause for 10 minutes or something and come back, and because you will see the image in a different way, and it will help you to spot problems. And so here I was not satisfied with the facade, so I'm still adding details with brushes, and always trying to paint something that makes sense and tell stories. And so you'll see now I'm gonna finish with some color grading, adding glazing cools in the shadow areas, and the warms and highlights. But not only this, adding also a little bit of warmth in the shadows, which is something that comes from traditional art. Again, it's good when you have a chance to play with colors, to see how they interact, to study how important it is to use colors in a certain way. Even if we eventually use photographs because clients want to see photoreal things, but no matter what, you have to put eventually your take on it, the brush work. And if you know how to use brushes and how to draw, of course, how to use colors, then eventually the result will be different. And I keep on telling myself, because I know that I have to keep on working hard with traditional tool and with digital tools. And so this is the final result. I had sharpness, and I had the final touches. Again, sharpness only where I need it, where I think it makes sense. Always to drive the attention, to tell the story, to set the mood of the place, and this is our goal. So, well, I hope you like this tutorial. I hope it was not too boring, and I thank you for following me so far. And you guys keep up the good work that always inspires me. And I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.